The Florida Panthers lose a late one against the Philadelphia Flyers on 2000's night on Vladimir Tarasenko's debut. What were the overall impressions of his first game? And we give our thoughts on the extensions of Gustav Forsling and Jonah Gadjovich.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, March 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get more with FanDuel and America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $150 if your first bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Cats fans, an exciting night coming in for the Cats in Vladimir Tarasenko's debut. And Gustav Forsling, fresh off an extension, where we're going to discuss more about that in segment number 3 as an extended conversation. And it's also another big day because 6 hours from this recording, it'll be the end of the trade deadline for the entire NHL. But it is a Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nich Fairbanks is back here on the show, off the IR, but here on Locked On Panthers, we don't do any cap circumvention here. So, and he wasn't even out for 28 days or 10 episodes. So, Nick, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm straight chilling like Mark Stone right now, waiting for game 1 of the playoffs to start.
Wait, a good way to start the show, my friend. But great to have you back, my friend. And for the Florida Panthers, 2-1 loss at the hands of the Philadelphia Flyers. Their 6-game home winning streak and 6-game winning streak overall came to an end on Thursday night, as like we said at the top, 2000s night for the Florida Panthers. We saw Peter Worrell, Roberto Luongo, Brian McCabe doing the ceremonial puck drop, and then Stephen Weiss there banging the drum, and just a great night overall as far as as far away from the result on the ice too. But the Florida Panthers really had a great jump in the first period, penalty free in that first one. Middle frame, the Philadelphia Flyers scored 10 seconds off the faceoff. Aaron Ekblad gets crossed up with the official, and then Gustav Forsling, 7 minutes later, he scores for his 10th goal of the season. Only the third Panthers defenseman to have multiple 10-digit goal seasons, along with Ekblad and Jay Bouwmeester. But it was a late one for the Philadelphia Flyers, as they score with 21 seconds left. Garnet Hathaway scores on a second chance opportunity with no Panthers defenseman around to clear the puck, and Sergei Bobrovsky gives up that rebound for the 2-1 regulation loss for the Cats against the Philadelphia Flyers. But my overall impressions of this one and all were really the when you think about 3 games in 4 nights, the travel and the no practice time for the Panthers in between, and they won't be practicing today. They'll just be focused on the trade deadline. But what were your overall impressions of the game, and even the third period, where Philly took it over after the first TV timeouts, with 14 minutes left?
So I think you need to look at it, as you said, this team had played 3 road games in 4 nights. They won every single one of them. They were hard and gritty. They weren't any kind of games that you would consider like, oh, they have this in the bag. So I think the fact that they came out in the first and they had a good jump is exactly what you want after coming off of a road trip. So does this loss bother me? No, not really. This is the second, game that they've lost. They've only lost 3 games in the last, 19 or 20 that they've lost with less than 30 seconds in the game. That could be concerning, but at the same time, like you have to put it in perspective of, listen, the team has been on a heater. They've been doing very well. They've had road wins over road wins, and they just got a significant piece put on the roster. So, there's a loss sting, yeah, but coming into today, our focus should be on what's coming up and what could be happening later today, possibly with the trade deadline. So, can't say that they didn't play well or anything, just bad luck. That's all.
Yeah, and like you said, this isn't really a loss that you really. This is one that you turn the page fairly quickly on.
Yep.
And even though the Philadelphia Flyers won the season series for the Panthers, 2-1 losses against them. I mean, credit to Samuel Urson who stopped 42 of 44 in the 2 games against the Panthers in the 2 games too, but also the board battles lost the turnovers in their own zone. You saw that this team was a little gassed when it came to that third period too. And let's talk about the new shiny toy for the Florida Panthers coming in. Vladimir Tarasenko plays on the left wing on that Barkov line. I'm not too shocked that he was there, but you kind of want to maybe start off with a bang. And there was a pretty nice scoring chance that Barkov won in the corner, and then he quickly tapped it to Sam Reinhart in the third period, which almost gave the Panthers the lead at the time too. But we all the talk all over the internet was him being a resident of Weston, 10 minutes away, family here, and also his quads too. I mean, my goodness, I want to know what his leg press is. But as far as his ability to just get up in the rush and all, we didn't see too much of that on Thursday night. But he looked to have been received pretty well as far as what I listened to post game too, with what Lundell and Forsling and Maurice said after. But what were your overall impressions of Tarasenko?
So I think one of the things that came out of the trade, because, there's player cards that come out to show, what kind of player they are, where they're dominant, where they have, opportunities and everything. Tarasenko, they said, has a defensive opportunity. He's a goal scorer. He's very good on the power play. He was the best player on the Senators this year besides Brady Tkachuk. So that says something. But I think 2 things. One, it's going to take a few games for him to gel with Barkov and Reinhart. They're not just This isn't going to be a 1-game thing. They're going to try to get into the mojo. And secondly, he helped backcheck. I remember there was a course of plays that happened in the third period where he was the one that was back checking and actually trying to take the puck away, which, if you look on Ottawa or any other team that he probably played for, it wasn't something that he was really, I guess, known for. And I thought that was actually impressive, or at least it was enlightening, just because now if he's able to buy into what Maurice and the team is doing, that's just another piece of the puzzle, and it adds to what exactly the Panthers are trying to do and everything. So if he continues that, I think he's going to fit in very nicely.
Yeah, and this is why whenever Maurice pulls out his lines, even going back to the start of training camp, you have those 2 guys who you want to continue to stick together, and then you add that third guy who could be a complementary piece. I mean, thankfully for the Panthers, it's 18 more games for them to try to find that. Even though, as compared to the NBA, the NHL trade deadline is a little later, so less games to try to get that chemistry going. But thankfully in hockey, if you're dressed, everyone is playing. So that is the great thing about having to roll 4 lines. And for a good part of the first 40 minutes, we saw the Panthers really rolling those lines, despite that being slow out of the gate on the opening faceoff in the second period. But I mean, it really came down to the final 14 minutes after that timeout, and even in the first period, I mean, there was a TV timeout where Maurice was kind of letting his bench know about the energy that was brought at times, and then the Panthers kind of had pinned Philadelphia in their own zone. I mean, Sean Walker got traded. Nick Sealer's out with an injury. Their third pair defense, neither of those guys played more than 5 games in the show. So, but also goes to show just the great coaching that is there with John Tortorella, the resume that he has in winning a Stanley Cup. Daniel Briere, they are living up to their Philly tough mentality there. And even if they fall back to earth next year, you see that there's building blocks as far as what they're doing as far as their rebuild. And thankfully for the Panthers, Philly's on the other side of the bracket if they make the postseason. And for entertainment purposes only, a Flyers Panthers Eastern Conference Final, I would give it a plus 3 million for that to happen. So, but y'all can old take expose me later if that does end up happening. But we're going to transition to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about our 3 stars of the game, when we thought this game was won or lost. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Factor Meals. And eating better is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. There are more than 60 add-ons to help you fuel up and feeling good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started and get after your goals. 2-minute meals, fuel up with Fast and Factor restaurant quality meals that are ready to heat and eat whenever you are. Pancakes, smoothies, and more. Discover a wide variety of easy options for the entire day, like breakfast, midday bites, and more. Flexible to your schedule, get as much or as little as you need by choosing your meals every week. Plus, you need to pause or reschedule you can pause or reschedule your deliveries every time. Sign up and save. We've done the math. Factor is less expensive than takeout, and every meal is dietitian approved to be nutritious and delicious. Head to factormeals.com/lockedon NHL50 and use code LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off. That's LockedOnNHL50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV's channels app. Back on this Friday, March 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday. So the Florida Panthers lose to the Philadelphia Flyers by a final score of 2-1 from Amerant Bank Arena on Thursday night from 2000's night. By the way, unofficial sponsor of this of 2000's night is presented by Marooney. If you need a car, truck, or van, who you're going to call? Marooney. And I hope you guys after the game got to watch the best damn sports show period after as well. So hopefully you guys got an opportunity to get some more sports coverage in for you guys. If you know, you know. But Nick, as far as 3 stars of the game for this one, got to give it to Samuel Ersson for the excuse me. Garnet Hathaway is my number 1 star for the Philadelphia Flyers, getting the GWG on this one. Samuel Ersson getting his 2nd win against the Florida Panthers in this one. And then number 3 for me, Gustav Forsling. Fresh off his extension with the Florida Panthers, his 10th goal of the season, like we said earlier, the only 3rd defenseman for the Cats to get to 10 goals in a season. But the Florida Panthers still don't have a defenseman with a hat trick. Aaron Ekblad's been close twice, multiple times. So maybe in this era we will see a hat trick by a defenseman for the Cats. But for you, who would you say are your 3 stars of the game?
You have to go with Garnet Hathaway as the first because that line in the final 10 to 15 minutes of that game just took over, and they were so close, and they finally were rewarded. So I'm going to have to give it to him. Second star, definitely Urson from Philadelphia. He's been lights out against Florida. I will say, though, Philadelphia's played Florida on, you know, unfortunate occasions. They came back from the All-Star break, didn't play their best game. They had some time off. And now that this game, they came back from a road trip and everything. Probably didn't have everything there. So I'd be interested to see if both teams played like similar style, or at least, had the same type of schedule and everything. But third star, I'm going to differentiate here. I'm going to go with Sergei Bobrovsky. Another game with 2 goals or less, and he
Mm-hmm.
just keeps pushing his name higher and higher in the Vezina trophy possibilities. And if anything, if he keeps playing like this, he's gonna challenge Hellebuck. I think Demko is gonna see a little bit of a slide, so I'm gonna go with Bobrovsky on this one.
Yeah, and going into the night, the save percentage was only 0.04 of a difference between Hellebuck and Bobrovsky. So that is a little bit, 15 plus games left for something to happen. And also, it's going to be interesting the splits that are going to be between the two. And the first matchup, Stolarz was in net because Bobrovsky was coming out of the All-Star break. The next matchup between Florida and Philadelphia will be on the second end of a back-to-back, coming right after they play the New York Rangers on that Saturday night, which will be a nationally televised game again in Madison Square Garden. Then the very next day, they just travel down down I-95 to get to Philly. So a little bit of a different scheduling difficulty for the Panthers as far as the type of team that they have there in Philadelphia. And listen, regardless of rebuild and all, that you got to love what they're doing as far as their scrappiness and all, and just taking away your time and space. And even the Florida Panthers spoke about it after the game. It's like they take away your space, and they were winning the majority of the board battles. And the Panthers, they had a hard time getting those pucks in deep and even getting through the neutral zone in this one too. When we thought this game was won or lost, it's funny because even before the final minute, I was thinking, okay, you get to overtime, you have the open ice, you have the talent advantage on paper. I'm thinking, okay, and also there were a lot of miscommunications between the Panthers too. There was like one line change where Kulikov wanted to try to come off the ice and Forsling was coming off, and then that led to a breakaway. I believe it was by Konechny. That was like, oof, that Sergei Bobrovsky had a big stop earlier there, but when I thought the game was won or lost, really was until Garnet Hathaway scored. And I'm just like, I literally like, not necessarily froze with my mouth open, being in disbelief. It's not a playoff game. It's not where it's still, they're still the leaders in the President's Trophy. It was more when Garnet Hathaway scored. If you're watching this on YouTube, and for those listening on audio, I just shrugged. It was just like, okay, it's just a bad bounce. The Panthers D was a little bit up the zone, maybe cheating for offense. I don't know, but that's my moment when I thought it was lost, because I really thought that even with the ice tilted in Philadelphia's favor in the third, thought that the Panthers were still going to manage it, and that was my moment.
So I'm probably going to go to there's not a specific, I guess, like play or moment for me, but I think it was just the transition of who took the momentum in the game. And I got to say, it really did feel like a 2000s night as a Florida Panther fan. This happened way too often where the team would just barely hang on. They'd be outshot, outplayed, and they would have their goaltender that would bail them out, who was Roberto Luongo at the time in the early 2000s. And he would do it game after game after game. But I would probably say around the 12-minute mark, when Philadelphia just wouldn't be relentless and not letting Florida out of their own zone. I had not seen the team had that much difficulty clearing the zone all season. And it just reminded me of former defensemen that we've had that could not clear the puck. They did not trust glass. They tried clearing it up the middle, and it would always be a giveaway, and it would be in the back of the net before we knew it. So, yeah, I would probably say about the 12-minute mark left in the third period that, hey, this seems familiar, vaguely familiar, and yeah, this game's not going to go the way we want.
Yeah, and looking up I looked up the record of them during the 2000s and including ties.
No.
Hold on. Let me read it.
No.
286 wins, 318 losses, 54 ties, and 85 overtime losses. And that was without a season that was played in 2005. And that is for the Panthers, the bottom five in the NHL, fourth worst to be exact during that era. They put win. I looked up the stat, and from December 1st, 2000 to December 31st, 2009. They even have Winnipeg Jets there, not Atlanta Thrashers there, but but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, that was their record during that time. And just again, like I said, this night, that night should be a form is a form of celebration of as far as how far they came. And once again,
Correct.
great to see Stephen Weiss in the building, and even during his interview with Randy Moeller during the intermission, he just discusses how far they've come and even broke down how well the Florida Panthers lines roll as far as that. So great to see that he still keeps up with the franchise, even though he hasn't played there in 11 years. In 11 years. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3. We're going to discuss more about the extensions of Gustav Forsling and Jonah Gadjovich. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And no matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Need Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match assessment and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all your job sites combined, according to Talent Nest in 2019. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit and upgrade your post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Valid through March 31st. Indeed.com/lockedon. Claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Third and final segment here on this Friday, March 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday. And Nick, when Bill Zito took the podium on Thursday morning from Fort Lauderdale at War Memorial, I was at least only just expecting him to just break down the trade for Vladimir Tarasenko. And when hindsight is 2020, obviously, but GM speaks right after the deadline or shortly after, depends on when he gets the trades into the central registry. But now looking back at it, it all makes sense why he went to address the media on Thursday and on Friday instead of just waiting. But the greatest thing about Thursday was he was the one, not any national insiders. He was the one to say that he announced the extensions between the Florida Panthers and Gustav Forsling and also Jonah Gadjovich. The terms of Gustav Forsling's extension is 8 times $5.75 million starting next season, which will take him to his age 35 season. So for the 27-year-old defenseman, he's going to be in Sunrise, Florida until his age 35 season. And the terms of the contract is first 6 years a no move clause, and then the last 2 years a modified no trade clause, a 16-team no trade clause. Jonah Gadjovich, a 2-year, $775K contract. Guy who's played in the World Juniors and didn't necessarily wasn't a mainstay in San Jose. Now getting to 2 years with the Florida Panthers, a one-way deal for Gadjovich. But the story of Forsling, drafted by Vancouver, didn't work out in Chicago, waived by Carolina, and then the Panthers make him develop him into a number one defenseman, and also now this extension. And although the term is a little head scratching for me as far as that, when you think about who's going to be locked up, the cap rising, hopefully for the Panthers, even if they get to that tail end of the contract, number one, you hope it doesn't take up a good portion of the cap. And two, if anyone has anything to say about the AAV or the cap hit for the defenseman, hopefully you can just do this motion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're watching on the YouTube, that is me pointing to the rafters and hopefully what is a Stanley Cup championship for the Florida Panthers, which they still have an opportunity in this window. 3 defensemen are locked up past next year. But also, this might mean that it's going to be hard to bring back Brandon Montour for the Florida Panthers come next year, because he's going to get paid. He's the numbers are getting up there for the defenseman from last season, so it's going to be difficult for them. But your overall impressions of Gustav Forsling getting his 8-year extension with the Cats?
First impression is, where did this come from? They've been talking about it all season. Kevin Weeks has been posting his forehead and part of his eyes like every other week, saying, hey, that there's there's kind of contract talks between Florida, Forsling, Montour, and Reinhart and everything. And all of a sudden, Forsling signed. He's signed to a great deal as far as the cap hit goes, because he could have gotten way more on the open market. I was saying that he could have gotten 6.5, almost 7, if he wanted to, because he could have commanded that. But I think the way that Bill Zito probably positioned it is, hey, listen, we brought you here. We were patient. We brought you into a good situation, and you flourished. A lot of people put emphasis on the taxes. Yeah, that could play a part because he mostly plays in Florida for the season, whether here or in Tampa. But I think at the end of the day, Forsling wanted to be here. My last point about Forsling, it's not so surprising after I thought about it a little bit, is guess who was traded the evening before to Vegas? It was Noah Hanifin, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were deep into trade discussions to get him. The fact that he went to Vegas and he was no longer on the board, and Hanifin and Forsling are very similar type of defensemen, I think it put Zito in a position like, hey, we couldn't get Hanifin, so we need to lock up Forsling. So I'm either going to add a little bit more money to the deal to get it done, or I'm going to make sure it's an 8-year term. Maybe that's what Forsling really wanted, was the security. So to me, it's not surprising after thinking about it in that way that they couldn't get the big fish that they wanted. But Forsling, hey, I'll take it all day.
Yeah. And think about recently, he became a dad, and the constant word that he used to describe is it's hard. Even in his intermission interview with Katie Engelson, he was just starting to get choked up. Bill Zito was getting choked up when talking about him, because of just getting to know the person and knowing the chip on his shoulder that he's had since the time he was drafted. And I mean, him getting a loud ovation from the Emirates Bank Arena crowd when he was introduced in the starting lineup, and then scoring a goal in the second period. I mean, you can't write a better script like that when it came to that, just regardless of the loss on Thursday night. And just when you think about what he brings to the table, and also if they lose Brandon Montour in the offseason, you're gonna have to find a replacement on power play 1. They've already developed Forsling from second pair defenseman to to top pair.
Mm-hmm.
What why wouldn't they develop now Forsling to be that quarterback, possibly that quarterback on the power play? I mean, holy crap, he blocks shots, he can stop on a dime, can close gaps, and oh my goodness, I'm incredibly jealous of his skating ability too. And just how fast he can get back in his own zone. And you think about the effort level too, that he doesn't cheat the game, which if you're giving out an 8-year contract, it's not. I mean, I'm not going to call any specific players out, but if you're given an 8-year deal for everything that Forsling has been through, you know that it's well earned, and that he's a
Mm-hmm.
person, he's a guy who has definitely who is going to continue playing with that chip, even though he got paid.
Definitely. And you talked about it, how he was getting choked up and Bill Zito was getting kind of emotional about it. To have a chip on your shoulder and finally get to where you actually want to be, not only professionally, but also, as a person, it's a very gratifying and humbling experience just
Mm-hmm.
because of everything that he's gone through. He was drafted by Vancouver, didn't work out. Chicago, it didn't work out. And believe me, I still follow some writers in Chicago still, and they were very happy to see Forsling get the extension that he did. So it just they knew he was a good guy. It's just unfortunately for the Hawks at that time, it's just not what they were looking for. I don't know what Carolina was doing, to be honest with you. I think they could have probably let go of another piece or put another piece on waivers because he could have been very instrumental on their team for the last couple of years, especially last year. But it's well deserved. I couldn't be happier for him, and I'm glad he's in the fold for the next 8 years, hopefully. Not just for the 6 that he has no move clause, but it just goes to show everybody out there that if you work hard and you just do what you need to do and you can excel at it, that your dreams can come true.
Yeah, and let's quickly touch on Gadjovich as well before we get out of here. And this is another example of needing cheap talent on the roster. 2-year extension, one way, like we said at the top of this segment, where the it's not a significant rise, but the fact that someone's in the system. And I had someone say, "Why is he getting extension if he's getting scratched?" And I'm just thinking, think bigger picture here. Let's think bigger picture when it
Hmm.
comes to where the Florida Panthers are heading, and guys who got, and he's going to be on that fourth line, who in your face, uh, tight forecheck, and also not afraid to drop the gloves in Gadjovich, and that is a guy that you are hoping to just continue as far as the culture that they're trying to bring over here for the Panthers. And I mean, there's gonna be more of that cheap talent on the way. If we assume that Semaskevich is going to spend his first full season next year in South Florida, and maybe even Justin Sorda, assuming that you lose Montour in free agency, yeah, you're going to have to replace that. Uvis Balinskis' contract is going to be a one-way next year
Hmm.
too. So that is another thing as far as having that cheap talent and knowing that you are taking care of your guys. That's the best thing of all. You're taking care of the guys that you have here.
Definitely, and Gadjovich has definitely played his part in the games. Now, I think he's been a little bit snake bitten with some of the goals that he could have scored. Like there was one against New Jersey, I believe, the other night that it was a beautiful pass, and he got the tip of his stick on it, um, and it just went off the post and everything. So he's one of those guys that fits his role very nicely. He's a fourth liner that will bang, that will be able to forecheck, which is he's one of the main reasons why that fourth line has been one of the most effective in the league this year. I mean, you have Lomberg there, you have Stenlund who's come in and had a career year. So I think those three going into the playoffs is going to be crucial. And if he can continue to play the way he has and stay healthy, because that's been another concern since coming into the Florida Panthers organization, he'll definitely be able to make his mark here. And who doesn't love blue collar players? to be honest. I mean, this is the sport for it.
And he'll stay ready. That's the thing. He'll stay ready. Steven Lorentz will stay ready. And here's another person who will stay ready. Someone who just cleared waivers in Will Lockwood. So thankfully he is still with the organization after he has been cleared. So there is that opportunity to get that call up if an injury situation happens for the Cats too. Like we said, Bill Zito will address the media at 3 p.m. Today from Fort Lauderdale to discuss anything else as far as the trade deadline, if anything else happens to go down for the Panthers. And you could read my written work at thehockeynews.com/Florida throughout past 3 p.m. We don't know if we're gonna have a Saturday show just yet. If the Florida Panthers don't make another move, then just go to hockeynews.com/Florida to check the coverage as far as the recap. But if they do, could have another show. But Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. The Florida Panthers lose 2-1 against the Philadelphia Flyers, but an opportunity to bounce back as they welcome in Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, and Dryden Hunt to South Florida. So tell everybody where they can find you online, my friend.
Armando, thank you again. I'm hoping that we make another move or two to solidify at least either the defense or we find another way to fit the bottom nine. But everybody, you guys can find me on X at Prudentious0. Let's have a fun day, and I will see you guys next week.
See you next week, my friend. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.